Hello and welcome to the Story Forge. I'm your host, Grant Ellis, and this week we're going to talk about world building for your campaign with an emphasis on arcane magic. Magic is the influence of a supernatural force in our campaign setting. It comes in many shapes, sizes, and flavors. Magic in most Dungeons & Dragons campaigns is a force of nature that can be studied as a science, has divine or otherworldly origins, and has deep roots in the fantasy literature and cinematic traditions. This tradition is most apparent through the creation of magic items, the use of spell focuses, and the act of memorizing spells with an emphasis on the arcane. Spells such as Plane Shift or Dimension Door imply that there is a cosmology, that places such as these in fact exist in our campaign setting, and it cements them firmly within the fiction of our world. Standard spells in Dungeons & Dragons rely on verbal, material, and somatic components. Spoken words, rare physical objects, and elaborate gestures are required to perform these spells, which have origins in the literature and media that influences the design of the game. On the other hand, there's also divine magic, meaning power that is granted from or given by a deity, god, demigod, or some other higher power. Miraculous healing and transmutation is found throughout religious history across many faiths and cultures. Even the word magic comes from the Persian word magos, meaning priest. This finds its way into fantasy role-playing since its inception. We'll talk about divine magic in a future episode, as well as alternative sources of magic such as pact magic with otherworldly patrons, but for the purpose of this episode, let's focus on the arcane. We're going to go through an example of integrating arcane magic into our world design. In this example, in my world, arcane magic will be taught by secret orders. The campaign takes place far away from cities, and we will only be concerned with villages and small towns, with wilderness surrounding the settlements. I've decided that there is a 5% chance in these villages, the very small ones, that someone there knows something about magic. Maybe they have a relative who is a spellcaster, maybe there was a wizard who passes through once a year, but on a die roll, if I roll a nat 20, there's someone there that can point you to the nearest magic user or let you know when they'll arrive. It's probably going to be in the wilderness or a neighboring town. Should my players visit a town, I've decided there's a 25% chance that somebody there knows something about magic, and that there's a 10% chance that a magic user is in town. There's also a 5% chance that that is in fact the resident town where the magic user, either a wizard, sorcerer, warlock, etc., actually lives. And if there is one that lives there, we should examine the consequences. What type of magic user are they? We'll say mine is a charmer, a woman who appears plain at first, but she has a silver tongue that sows fast and fleeting friendships. What sort of spells do they typically use? Well, obviously, she will use spells that manipulate people for better or for worse, but we'll also say she knows some utility spells that bring lights and sounds that can influence the environment. What components do these spells take? Her components are primarily made out of the tongues of small birds and amphibians. I know that's gross, but it's what she uses. She also wears a pair of golden slippers that allow her to focus the arcane magic. How can party members gain influence with her? She'll help anyone with a good story. Now for an activity, let's go through some questions found in the 5th edition Dungeon Master's Guide and apply them to the world and campaign setting. In your campaign setting, is some magic more common than others? If so, what magic is more common? Is some magic more socially unacceptable? Is there forbidden magic in your world? What magic is forbidden to use? Which magic is more rare than other magics? How unusual are members of each spell-casting class? Think about the various classes that can cast spells and come up with the probability of running into a member of each class. Or identify the regions in your world where they live. How common are those who can cast high-level spells? How rare are magic items, magical locations, and creatures that have supernatural powers in your campaign setting? How likely are players to run into werewolves, vampires, liches, witches, hags? At what power level do these things go from everyday to exotic? How do authorities regulate and use magic? How do normal folks use magic or protect themselves from it? So there you have it. That's a brief video on arcane magic and how it fits in your world and campaign setting. I want you to take some homework away from this video and compare magic as it exists in the various Dungeons & Dragons settings. compare Magic and Planescape to Dark Sun to Forgotten Realms to Greyhawk, and come up with some of your own conclusions about how Magic fits in each and every one of those worlds. Next week we're going to do a Dungeon Master's Workshop where we take some ideas from these various videos that we've presented so far and start putting them all together for a world and campaign setting. Thank you, and I'll see you next week.